Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of SuperFantaFi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Ishura Season 2, Episode 2. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So first and foremost, we got our new intro with completely new characters. Obviously, last episode we got some familiar faces from last season. I'm sure we'll get some of those sprinkled in throughout the season, but it's mainly going to be focused on new characters, which makes sense. But they will probably every once in a while interact with some of the characters from last season, as we saw last episode, especially like specifically in Kuro's side of things of last episode. But yeah, new intro, new characters. I was to be fair, I was like severely surprised that from what I could see, it looked like there was not a single character that survived season 1 in that intro. It's all new characters, which is so interesting. I'm curious to see if Kuro ends up being kind of our major through line throughout the season, because I was thinking to myself, I guess technically, and Sojiro technically were, but it's like not really, because I mean the through line is like all these characters you follow end up connecting, but it's like I guess they were the closest thing you had to a through line, and he seems to be our new through line. But we'll see how much he's involved in these episodes. But the fact this part of last episode was set up to set up Kuro, because he seems to be a major part of this coming like through line of what's happening in Arteria and what they want him to investigate, what he's going to get out of this, which, it's a perfect segue, because we had that opening where he's with, what's the ogre's name? Was it Zizuma? But it was an ogre that he has an acquaintanceship with, because he talks to, God, I'm terrible with names. The homunculi that he's with, I can't remember her name now. Is it Kune? Is that it? I cannot remember. I was saying it last episode, but I don't remember it now because they didn't really say it this episode. But she was like, "Oh, you're waiting to talk to an old friend." He's like, "I wouldn't really call us friends, but this is connected to like the old kingdom and the old kingdom loyalists and stuff like that." Because he brings up, because he fought with Lithia, and by that I mean like he fought on the side of Lithia, and he's like, the principality might not be gone, but those of us who still remain are kind of an issue for Aracia. And so I think I kept calling it Aracia last episode instead of Arteria. I think I kept saying Aracia instead of like Arteria. I think I was being stupid. So do forgive me. I want to say I was making that mistake last episode. I'm sorry. But nevertheless, Kuro's talking to the guy because he's like, what was it? There was something about the old kingdom that made Arteria feel like, it is Arteria, right? It's not Aracia like I was saying before. I'm pretty sure, yeah, it is Arteria. I think so. God, I feel so stupid. Do forgive me. Having brain fog right now, so do forgive my stupidity. But basically believing that there was someone inside of Lithia that was actually connected to being like an old kingdom loyalist, and he was trying to figure out who it was, But like the ogre dude was trying to make a point, like we have different philosophies. The old kingdom loyalists, they're all about kind of what's in the best interest of the minions. Like that species, not really what everyone else was fighting for, because their ideologies were different. And even kind of asking Kuro about, the side of things that he's on right now, because it's like, oh, you who was, with your eyes being so clairvoyant. The fact is that we're here talking right now. You're coming at me more as a detective, kind of speaks volumes, and he ends up kind of poking the bear about Kuro's eyes, because he's like, yeah, you're kind of missing a step, because it turns out there was poison in the room. And he's like, yeah, you normally would have immediately recognized that, but it took you too long. I mean, Kuro still came out on top in the end result, but the fact is, it's still proof that his eyes are getting weaker. They're deteriorating, as he brought up last episode, considering like, he's like, yeah, you were right. He says it after killing him, being like, you were right. Me, like, in the past, I would have easily killed you the moment I detected it. Like, I would have detected that poison the moment you dropped it, but I didn't. But yeah, once again, trying to get some information out of him. And it seems like the loyalist that was there was the ogre dude. Because Kuro's kind of saying like, because he's trying to say like, right, you want a break from all of this, but after all the death you've caused, Kuro, like all that's gonna follow you and drag you to hell. But Kuro's like, I'm done with ideologies and fighting for what other people want. I just want to live life my way, just for myself. I'm not doing this for any other cause but me. So, and I guess he's trying to figure out what at the heart of all of this. It's what's really going on. But Homedew was like, they would never tell a man-eating ogre like me, like the plan. So they're no closer to finding anything else. But this is the job Elena gave him last episode. So I wonder where did they go from here. I mean, I'm sure that's part of the job, but he didn't get that much information out of him. So it's like, well, he's got to move on to the next source to figure something out. So we'll see where things kind of go on that front. I should also note, I completely forgot that the ogre dude had actually mentioned and referenced Lana, because I guess like she was someone they both knew from their past and stuff. But then he was like, yeah, I found her dead body on the outskirts of town, like she was dead in the street like a dog. And he's like, yeah, I buried her. But he also brought up like, oh yeah, but she was also kind of like a double agent, because she was kind of working for once again, I'm butchering it, like Arteria or Asia. It's like she was working for them too. So it's like, yeah, it is what it is type of situation. So it's kind of like, hey, this is someone you knew, and it's kind of like the cutthroat nature, just the sides and lines being drawn and people choosing sides to benefit themselves for whatever purposes. And it's just kind of like there's like a little heartbrokenness to it, but it's also just kind of like, I don't know, there's a very, like I said, matter of factness of, yeah, she's dead, and it is what it is. But on the other side of things, we go to Shirok doing some survey investigation, and he goes and meets Linaris, and I figured something had to be up with just the whole like, oh, his finger getting pricked on the roses, and I was like, and the fact is he didn't even notice it either. I was like, that's going to be interesting. I felt something was off the moment, and Linaris invited him in. It's like, oh, there's no servants here. He's like, oh, are you the only one living here? She's like, oh, I live here with my dad. And I'm just like, yeah, this seems off. I was waiting for her to kill him, and it was just a matter of how are you going to do it? What's your situation going to be? Obviously, like, she's the title character of the episode, so I was like, I didn't know what her constitution or circumstances were going to be. But yeah, Shirok is like infatuated with her immediately. I also felt like it was almost kind of like that, oh, I'm one day away from retirement. It's not the same, but like when Shirok was like, oh yeah, like I'm one of people, who lost a lot because of the True Demon King, but I survived. I thought I was pretty sure I was going to die on the battlefield, but I didn't, and I came back here, And so for him, it's like, considering like a lot of people lost so much more, it kind of feels, I think for him, he was kind of making a point that it kind of felt like in bad taste that I get to keep my life despite all that was lost, and so many people lost so much because of the True Demon King, so he wasn't necessarily in the same boat as other people. But she talks about what she lost, and I'm curious if that's relating to her dad or to the organization as a whole. Like, what did the True Demon King take away from them, or is that just kind of supposed to be her like leading him on? I knew something was up. And then she gave him the letter, and it's like, oh, we will see each other again. And the moment he brought it to his boss, or the guy that sent him to do the survey, the letter was empty. And it's like, okay. And he brings up the whole thing. We find out that Linaris is a vampire. The Obsidians are vampires. And they kind of bring up something really, really interesting, saying that basically one of the most important thing they learn from visitors from different worlds, like Maki or like Sojiro, for example, those are like the two prime visitors that we're aware of, but there's probably been plenty. We don't know how. I'm sure they're rare, but we don't know how rare visitors are. Maybe, I don't think they ever talked about like the exact number of visitors that exist in this world. We just got to know 2 of them last season. That was about it. Like, not unless there were others, but I'm pretty sure they're the only ones. I just said Magi. I looked it up. I was like, that sounded wrong. It's Dekai. I probably got his name wrong last time. The reason why is because I'm combining his name and his title. It's Dekai the Magpie, but I think that's where I was getting Magi from. I think that's where I was messing up. I don't think I called him Dekai last episode. I think I got his name wrong as well. But either way. But the whole point was like, etymology is what was kind of brought from distant world to this world. And so they learned about kind of like diseases and stuff and how they spread. And so it's so interesting because like what I always talk about it, it's so interesting like how vampirism can be viewed depending on the subject. Like some series and things view it from a scientific standpoint, other things look at it from like a more magical standpoint. It's always interesting, and that's something I've seen in more recent years is I mean, maybe it happened a lot in the past and I was just unaware, but I feel like in more recent years I've seen vampirism take a more science fictional approach, because vampirism gets treated more like zombieism, which zombies always kind of, for the most part, probably in the same vein, in more modern eras, has always been kind of more of a science fictional thing. Every once in a while, it becomes a more fantastical thing, but vampires have kind of taken that similar approach, which I think is interesting. But then he talks about the fact is like, yo, Shirak, you've become a corpse. He's like, no, I'm not dead. I'm still alive. He's like, corpse doesn't mean you're dead. Basically, they're able to control you. And my immediate thought was, oh, the wound on his hand. And it's like, well, she never had any point. I was like, I would assume it had to be like a direct connection of blood meets blood, but because they even said like there's a lot they don't know about vampires. They're aware of vampires' existences, but their entire constitution and how they operate, they know enough about them, but there's still a massive question mark in relation to them. So, and it's like, yeah, you, without even realizing it, you'll be under their spell and their control. So, we have to tie you up, lead us back to where Linaris and her house is, and they burned it down. It's like, oh, the moment Shirak was like, I don't want to see the bodies, when the soldier was like, hey, there's 2 corpses in there. I'm like, it's not their bodies. She sent you there with a blank letter. It's like the whole thing was a setup. You could tell it was. I was like, she's just waiting for a moment to strike. But it's like, I guess she needed them in a certain proximity, and it makes it easier to do what she needed to do later. But that's why I was thinking it's so interesting, because I'm like, you should have seen the play coming, because I'm like, why would she send a blank letter? But I guess in his mind, the main dude, he was looking at Shirak as like, oh, you were the puppet. And to her being the puppeteer, so maybe, but it's like, would she let you figure that out so quickly? Like, why? She was close enough, like, couldn't she have done something? So that should have been a telltale sign there. But they went down, burned the house, castle down, and he's like, don't worry, Shirak, we're going to send you to a hospital, you're going to be good. But then, like, Lenore shows up, and she, like, and absolutely wrecked shop. I mean, that was a massacre without even lifting a finger. Basically had every soldier there kill themselves. It was brutal. People chopping each other's head off, shooting each other, slashing each other in the middle. It was gruesome. And because at first it's like, wait, did she already have people implanted? But when everyone's attacking each other, it's like, whoa, this doesn't make any sense. She hasn't come in direct contact with all these people. That's not possible. And it's because he finally realizes at the end, it's a mutation, like diseases do. Diseases can mutate. And I guess because the others amongst him, the rest of the Obsidians, I don't think they're vampires. They could be. Because I would assume Linaris and her dad are the only vampires, or maybe it's just Linaris, which I'm curious to find out. Like, vampirism is, like I said, being treated like a disease. So did she get infected, like, with the disease and became a vampire a while ago? Or is she fairly newish to the vampirism? Or is it like, no, she has been a vampire, like, for a while, but it's still, like, being treated like a disease you could pass on? Because vampirism, like, mind control and stuff like that, she doesn't need to have direct contact. She herself, because of a mutation in her, is able to do it through an airborne means, which I'm like, oh, man, you silent but deadly. You didn't even realize it was that's why she was able to get the Shirak. It's like, yeah, it seemed easier because it's like, oh, I have direct connection with. And the moment those soldiers showed up to burn their mansion down, they fell into her trap. That's why I was like, I guess that's why she did what she did, hoping they would attack and bring every soldier there just to make sure it got done. And it made it that much easier. Like, cool, you're all caught in my web. I can not glamour, they don't use it in this sense, but glamoring is kind of like, compulsion is the word I'm looking for, not glam. Well, because sometimes those kind of get interchanged. Glamoring, mind controlling someone, and compulsion, kind of like the Vampire Diaries, that's the term compulsion. I can't remember what series or whatever used the term glamour. I don't remember. Whatever the case may be. So I guess that's what that really was. I guess that's, yeah. And poor Shirak, because he's up there being like, didn't you say that you were alone and stuff like that? You know, because he tried to not believe that she was this terrible person who just literally had all these people come over here and kill each other. And she wheels out her dad. And I don't, Shirako's kind of making it seem like you're willing out a corpse. He's not even alive. He's dead. You're holding on to someone that's dead. So that's why I was like, is her dad so old and lost? Maybe he entered that state because, like, maybe it's kind of like the Odin sleep where it's like, that's how he dies, by going into a deep, deep sleep type of situation. A pseudo coma-esque. I wonder if that's kind of the state her father is in, and maybe that's a byproduct of the true demon lord, and it took all this time for them to build themselves back up, you know? Because these are the people with her, the vanguards, so I'm assuming they have foot soldiers and stuff, so those are just like the head honchos of the organization, but they have like foot soldiers underneath them, so we've only met like the lieutenants and generals, and not like the entire force of the Obsidian eyes and stuff, so... Felt bad for Shirako. It's like, hey, that's once again, don't ever feel like, unless you, I was about to say, unless you're a title character, don't get too attached to anybody, but it's like, well, title characters can drop dead left and right, as we saw last season, so don't get attached to anybody necessarily, so. Because they've also taken an interest in the tournament as well, and I'm curious what the... Once again, it seems like she's coming at this from, it's time for us to reclaim everything that we've lost, you know? Because it's like a war is coming and she's kind of thriving for. I don't know if that's necessarily the tournament. It's probably the Old Kingdom Loyalist stuff versus Arteria, like, all that's going on. So... made sure that home dude, I keep forgetting his name, but he's like the only dude that survived the situation, but that's because she needed him to be her puppet to go amongst like the head honchos and say like, oh yeah, like the Obsidian Eyes have been taken care of, we wiped out whatever was remaining, but I wanted to take the surviving people who helped me make that happen, I want to put them in the tournament. So that's how the Obsidians got their ticket into this whole situation. But they were also having a conversation about like, okay, so what was it, like Tuffy or whatever is like the city's name or whatever. It's like it's been taken over by loyalists, and it's like, what are they waiting for? And one of the head honchos references the storm from the beginning of episode 1. The God, I feel so stupid. I'm forgetting its name already. The storm that basically rips anything apart, like as we saw at the beginning of episode 1. It's like they're waiting to use that to their advantage, and it's heading right towards them, and that becomes a point of conversation too of like, you know, how do we know these reports aren't false? Which I brought it up last episode too, like, could that storm be somebody? Like, is it something that has a physical body that manifests itself like that storm, or is the storm itself like, I mean, we've seen some like non-conventional like beings, you know, like Hagure from last season, kind of being like the tree creature that he is, and you know, so it's like, it's not, but I mean, once again, you're a species in this world versus like you're talking about something that's like a force of nature. So it's either something disguised as a force of nature, or it's a force of nature that somehow gained sentience. I mean, as it was discussed last episode, it is worshipped like a god, so that's the thing of like, is it a person manifesting that, controlling that, or is it the storm that kind of gained its own sentience and became kind of like a god? I don't know. And what role it's going to play, especially because we have the Calamity Day thing moving up. I don't remember what it was at the end of episode 1. It was quite a bit. It might have been like 30 something days. I could have sworn it was like 38, but maybe it was like 20 something. It definitely was jumped to 11, and by the end of the episode it's 5 days away. I was like, I wasn't expecting that massive a skipping around time. So I was like, oh, I guess we're going to get to that calamity a lot quicker than I thought we were. Not less like the other episodes, you know, are kind of like constantly moving around time of like, oh, the calamities 40 days away at the time of this story taking place. But I mean, everything seems to be in chronological order so far. That, like I said, that could change. So I'm interested to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and Goodbye.